Ladies and gentlemen, the International Air Transport Association, IATA, is the global voice of the airline industry. And at this year's Aviation Stakeholders Convention, we do have the absolute honor of receiving their regional vice president for Africa and the Middle East, a truly global perspective for our very Pan-African conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome onto the podium Mr. Kamil Al-Awadhi.
Your Excellencies, ministers, distinguished regulators, industry leaders, CEOs, and of course, it's an honor to be here today, and I actually made an effort to come here because I'm supposed to be somewhere else. I hate being one of the last speakers because everybody says, almost read off my speech, so I have very little to say. But so I went through it really quickly just now, and let me abbreviate because I only have 5 to 7 minutes according to the instructions I got from Bertie. 1, Africa is projected to outperform the global percentage when it comes to growth. So globally, it's about 4% growth this year. Africa is looking at 6%, all right? But stop there. And this is how I hate the way aviators package their messages. That 6% growth is of 2% of the world's traffic, which is not much, okay? It's actually disappointing. And this is the nuts and bolts of, I think, what we're all trying to say. We have the same common message. There's opportunities for growth, you know, here and there, and we need to work together, collaboration, connectivity, all the buzzwords that I've heard for the last 6 years in Africa. It's time to put this into practice. The 6% growth this year for Africa, when you look at it, so I just checked before I came on stage, Africa is 19% of the world's population at 1.58 billion, 1.6 billion. And the traffic projected this year, the African traffic is 2.9%. So at one point we have 19% of the planet that are only doing 2.9% of the flights, okay? And this is where we should be looking at, okay, what's wrong? Why is it happening? How do we improve it? And so on and so forth. There are a number of issues that I want to touch on before my 5 to 7 minutes finish, okay? Africa's doing actually quite well, even though aviation in general gets affected by world events anyway. I mean, I remember, so I'm old enough to remember the SARS. And when SARS happened, way over there, everybody over here suffered. A little like the volcanic ash, a little like COVID, and a little like the war in Iran right now. So anything that happens around the world actually impacts aviation around the world. And that's unfortunate. That's the nature of the business, but the business is resilient. But when you look at Africa, it's far less resilient because of the thin margins and, let's say, the lack of infrastructure and support and the age of the industry in Africa. It needs support. So my key challenges for Africa, my first one, and I've been saying this constantly for 6 years, is the safety standards. So I want to congratulate South Africa first for achieving 96% on the ICAO effective implementation, which is an incredible record for Africa. It is, you know, better than most of the European states. So well done, and I think Africa deserves. But it remains to say that for every 1 million flights, Africa has above 7 accidents, which is 3 times higher than anywhere else. And that's not acceptable. And I keep saying it, you know. I keep saying that, you know, to have an accident is unfortunate, but to not learn from it is unforgivable. And this is a fact that happens in Africa. Not only is the safety still low, and we have a higher number of accidents per year. But also, once we do have that accident, the authorities that investigate the accident take their time, or in most cases don't even report back the reasons and causes for the accidents, so the world can't fix the problem. And that's honestly not acceptable. So my biggest issue, to be honest, with Africa at the moment, or in the last 6 years, is the safety standards that we need to work on. The next issue, and I'll come back to that in the end before Bertie throws me off. The next issue that I'd like to talk about is the high cost taxes and charges, levies and fees, which is, it makes it virtually impossible to open a successful airline in Africa because of the incredible costs that an airline has to pay. And so when you look at, I have several members of my team dotted around different countries in Africa. One specifically specializes in the charges, levies, taxes, and fees. And she is busy 24/7 trying to cope with talking sense to governments, where the government says, we want to boost tourism, we need it for our GDP, and then another part of the government is increasing prices for landing, flyovers, fuel, taxes, security, you name it. And one of the highest charges, of course, I've ever seen is in Tanzania for the security charge, which is $48 one way. So effectively, they've added $100 for a ticket just for a security check that costs worldwide less than $1. Which is, so you can't encourage tourism to Tanzania while you rip them off for $100. Blocked funds, an issue that I've been talking about for 6 years. I'm not going to bounce into it, but I did demonstrate a couple of weeks ago in our Focus Africa and Addis the impact of a blocked fund on airlines. And effectively what happens, if you're owed $40 million and the currency drops over a year by 4%, you're in fact losing money on the flights that you've done that whole year. Of course, the connectivity, which has the visa, the visa requirements, airlines traveling to these locations, whether it's worth it or not, the infrastructure, investment in the ANSPs, and so on and so forth. That's also an issue in Africa, and it bothers me. It bothers me when, and this is a fact, what I'm going to say now, okay? I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying it, but an airline, if an airport wants to add another terminal, they increase the charges immediately so that the passengers fund the terminal before it's built. That's a fact. You'll see it all over the world. And then once the terminal's built, that charge stays there. Oh yeah, because it's going to cost more to operate that airport, okay? Airports make money one way or another, but it ends up initially being an airline's burden, and then later on becoming a passenger's burden, and it gets more expensive to travel into Africa. Okay, before I get kicked off, so for the safety issue, okay, because I can feel the heat now. So on the safety issue, I have a team, a large team, and I involved Geneva in it about 3 years ago, where I said, okay, let's if we talk a lot. This is repetitive, it's not new. I mean, I'm just looking at my notes just to remember what to say, but I'm not going to follow the speech. But we don't do anything. We just repeat the same thing all the time. Okay, so it's time we improved. So with the Focus Africa project, which started about 3 years ago, there was an intent to float some projects specifically focused on safety. What I launched a couple of weeks ago in Addis Ababa are two projects. One is a state safety program, which is compliance with ICAO Annex 19, and the other one was the ramp safety assessment. Both have been cleared by IATA board. Both are being studied. If Poppy was here, I don't think she knows, but we ripped apart her state safety program, and we now intend to apply that standard with the training, with the setup, unified with the 16 countries in SADC. This will be launched most likely the last quarter of this year, most likely take about 24 months to complete, and we're handling this with the intent that if Annex 19, which is the state safety oversight, is built up to a single standard across 16 states, the knowledge and capability and manpower can be shared to top-level standards which will force the aviation industry to improve. At the same time, the only part of ICAO that doesn't cover a crucial area is the ramp safety. There is absolutely no ICAO standards for the ramp, okay? So only IATA produces that. So we are customizing, we're almost finished, customizing a specific checklist for the ramp in Africa. These are my 2 promises for Africa. If there's anything I can do, at least let me try to do the safety part first while we negotiate everything else like we've done for the last 6 years. Thank you very much, everybody.